Welcome back to Undulations. So in this video, I'm going to be hooking the Kastle Drum to some other devices. And I'll start with a pocket operator, and then we'll talk about the drum and the Korg NTS1. And then I also want to show hooking the Korg SQ1 sequencer to the Kastle Drum. This sequencer doesn't have a voice of its own, but it's still an interesting thing to do. And then I couldn't do a video like this without hooking the Kastle Drum to the Kastle Synth, the 1.5, so I'll show that. And then lastly, the Kastle Drum and the VOLCA modular. Now before we start, I think it's worth talking some about how we connect things to the Kastle Drum in general. There's no MIDI port on here, so not going to have to talk about MIDI. And then there's another sort of simpler approach where you're just mixing the audio of the drum with something else. I'm not going to show any real examples of that, but I bring it up because it might be the thing that gives you the result that you really want. So maybe you have some sort of drone or texture, and then the drum just sort of goes along with it or fills it in. No real control signals passing back and forth. That might be good, or maybe you want to record the drum into software like a DAW and do multiple layers of it. That could be another good way to sort of pair the Kastle Drum. But what I'm going to talk about is going to be more along the lines of sync signals and control voltage signals, and so I want to go into a little bit of detail about what the possibilities are for that. Now, the Kastle Drum has got input patch points like trig in, drum modulation, pitch modulation, clock in. Those can receive signals from the other device, and then the drum can also send out signals like the clock, the LFO, or the pattern sequence. Those can go over to the other device. So you can do one way or the other, or both, and we'll look at examples of that. And I should add that recently Basel Instruments also unveiled a Easter egg mode that's hidden in the Kastle Drum, which allows us to do some unique things. I'm going to go into what that mode is, how you set it up. And so I should really be clear that I've got a lot of devices and there are a lot of different ways to set things up. And so I'm going to try and just give some examples, and you might find that something that I show on one device works good for a different device that you're interested in. So just bear that in mind. And I also want to say that especially on the VOLCA modular and the Kastle 1.5, there's so many other patching methods and things like that that can embellish and sort of refine the sound. I'm not going to do that. And so I'm just going to try to stick to the basics here, this connectivity stuff. Now, I'll be talking a lot about synchronization in this video, so sync in, sync out, and using the sync signals from all these devices. But bear in mind that they are not the same for each device. Different voltages, different signal shapes. The Korg devices have got these global parameter settings that let you sort of menu dive into the device and tweak some things about the sync signal polarity or the sync signal timing. And even the pocket operator's got sync settings on it. So that's just something to bear in mind, that if you can't get something to work or something isn't going right, that it might be your synchronization settings on one or the other of the devices. Now, maybe the most critical thing that I want to say about synchronization has to do more with music than any of the sort of technology. And that's that when I really say that two devices are synced, means that you've got one whose clock is running at the same speed as the other's clock, and there's some sort of control in between them that causes that. And they're probably going to be in phase also. And if you think about that, it may not actually be what you want, because it sort of takes two things that could conceivably like contribute to the music and locks them together. that can be good in some circumstances, but it's not always going to be what you want. You can think of it this way, that maybe you've got one of the clocks that is sort of at the musical tempo, and then the other clock you're free to maybe run it faster to provide some sort of like texture or glitchiness, or maybe you run the other one much slower than the song tempo, and that would enable you to do some more evolving types of things, or maybe a pitch, almost like a chord change. And so it's a lot to think about, like how closely synchronized you want your devices to be in this type of thing. Now, the last thing to say is that for a video like this, it's pretty much guaranteed that I'll be editing out a lot of the rate tweaking and pitch tuning and things about what key I'm in and what scale I'm in. And so it sort of comes together, but it's a gradual thing. And I don't necessarily want to show all of that on camera. Also, with the drum, there's this thing about hooking the plus patch point to the feed to change the pattern that you're sequencing. And that's a huge part of getting something to sound better or right. And so I probably won't show all of that, but I just want to be clear that this sort of thing, to try and get something to kind of congeal and fit together, can take quite a bit of time. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so we've got a really minimal setup here. I've just got the Kastle Drum and a PO14 sub with some patterns I made for it. I've got a aux cable coming from the pocket operator into the I/O port on the Kastle Drum. Got some patch cables. That's all we're going to need at first. This setup, I'll say up front, doesn't really work that well, but it's worth finding out why. And so to start with, all I'm going to do, I'm going to put a patch cable into the drum port there, and then I'm going to tap off of the I/O on the right side. If I hit play, we hear the pocket operator. That's just a sort of a mixing port there on the Kastle Drum. Now if I go to the left side, we hear audio again, but what I'm going to do is change the sync mode. Right now we're in sync mode 0 on the sub. I'm going to put it into sync mode 1. All right, so hit play, and you hear the sync signal on the left channel. All right, but then over on the right channel, still got the audio going there. So I'm going to leave the audio hooked up. Now we've got a sync signal that comes out of the left side of the I/O whenever we push play on the pocket operator. And what are we going to do with that? The thing that would be ideal would be that if I put it into, say, trig in, that when I hit play, we'd hear anything from the Kastle Drum, but we don't, because if I unplug the audio from the sub, you don't hear anything. Now, is the drum even hooked up? It is. Now, the problem is that the pocket operator's sync signal is too low of a voltage to trigger trig in on the Kastle Drum, and that also means that it's too low to trigger the clock in feature. So we don't have a whole lot of options because of this low sync signal. It's 1 volt. I decided I would take a look at it on the oscilloscope, and took a little video of that. So take a look. There it is. It's just 1 volt. And then if you look at some of these other things like the Korg NTS1 or the SQ1 or the VOLCA modular, they're all in the 5 volt range. So pocket operator sync signal is very low. Now, that's the way that it should be because of the way it's designed. It, as you see, feeds right in along with the audio. So Teenage Engineering does not want somebody to push the wrong button on the pocket operator and then have a huge click signal either hurt their ears or below a speaker or something like that. So it's not a bad design, but we're going to have to try and just do our best with it. So to start with, what can we do? We can take it and put it into the drum modulation port. So I'm going to start it here. Let me unplug the pocket operator audio first so we don't hear anything, but then when I turn drumMod up, all right, so now with this setup where I've got the sync signal going into the drumMod, I've got the drumMod cranked all the way up, and so when I push play on the pocket operator, we're going to get a drum, and we're also going to have the pocket operator audio, and that sounds like this. All right, so kind of weak. All it is sort of a metronome hit. It even skips every now and then. So not that great when you try to use the pocket operator to sync the Kastle Drum. And I'm going to try to come back to this later in the video after we've learned about the Easter egg mode, because you can at least get a melody out of the Kastle Drum. And so it's somewhat of an improvement if you're sitting somewhere and all you've got is the drum, the pocket operator, and an aux cable and your headphones. So what to do? We're going to need another piece of gear and something very basic. That is just a Y cable. So this is a cable that is it's stereo 1/8 inch on one side, and then 2 mono cables on the other side. And the way we're going to use that is let's take the aux cable out of the pocket operator, out of the Kastle, and we're done with that. And what we're going to do is put the stereo into the drum like that. And this is going to be a little strange. We're going to put one side of the stereo cable into the input over here, and then the other side into the output. And what we're going to do is send a signal from the Kastle into the pocket operator to sync it, and then a audio signal is going to come out and come back into the Kastle. So the only thing we really need different is this Y cable set up like this. And what I'm going to do to start with is try and find the sync signal. Now what I want to do is be in sync mode 2. Hopefully it'll let me go to that. There we go. So we're in sync 2. Now that means that the sub is basically waiting for a sync signal. And the place that's going to come from is the clock on the drum. So let me put that in there. And I'm going to put that into the right side because I know that that goes to the red plug on my Y cable. Not all Y cables are like that, but this one is. All right, so that's going to send the sync signal out. And then same as before, we're going to tap the audio. It's in the left channel this time. So we're running sync 2. One side has got clock that's going in over here, and then the other side has got audio that's coming out. I'm going to put that into the drums port. So it's pretty minimal stuff. It's just 2 patch cables so far and this Y cable set up like this. All right, so I'm going to turn up the tempo a little bit here and push play on the pocket operator. I'm going to turn up the volume a little bit. Now what you'll see is that it's in time with the Kastle tempo. Very slow, very fast. So now that we have the Kastle syncing the pocket operator, we have an immediate advantage where I'm going to be able to put in the pattern signal to the drum modulation and start to get sounds from there. And then I gotta plug something into the plus here, and this is going to be our little method to control the feed. I just want to get rid of the default pattern because I'm tired of hearing it. So we'll come up with something. Alright, we got that. Now I'm going to push play on this. And I kind of like to back off a little bit on the drumMod to make it not hit one of those synthesis modes. Alright, so it's already sounding better. I'm going to mix in the noise also. And patch from over here on the stepped into the pitch modulation. Alright, so I'm just going to leave it with this. I think it sounds pretty good. I really like how you can hear some of the noise sort of rips in the gaps of the sound. Alright, so NTS1 and Kastle Drum, it's a really nice setup, and let me go over a little bit about what I've got here. I've got the main aux cable going out and then through a volume attenuator, because I find the Kastle Drum still a little bit hot for the audio input of the NTS1. So that's getting the signal into the NTS1 and then they're being combined. And then I've got that going out of the NTS1 into the recorder. Then the other thing on here is that this is the sync out port on the NTS1. I've got that going into the I/O port over here on the drum. Now, one thing I want to mention setting wise on the NTS1, let's hold reverb and I'm going to plug it in. That takes us into the global parameters. And I'm going to scroll through them down to the step right there, and I want it set on 1. Use the B knob to either set it for 0 or 1. You can try both, but I find that it fills things out better to have it set on 1, and then you press ARP to save your setting, and so we're started up there. Then next thing I want to do up front to make sure that the volumes are okay is I'm going to kind of choke down a little bit on the NTS1 sound. I'm just going to go with the simple saw wave. Got to plug in. Now I'm going to turn it up a little bit and we'll get some sound. I'll leave it there like that. Now I'm going to turn on the Kastle Drum. And so that's, again, coming through the audio in and out. And I'm going to grab the sync signal coming from the NTS1 and we'll just listen to it. There it is. Alright, and this is a case of where it's enough voltage to trigger the clock in. You see it sort of blink, and so now it's we'll see in a sec that we're keyed to the timing of the NTS1 on the pattern sequencer. Alright, so next I'm going to go over to the ARP, and I'm just going to make some changes to that. Let's see, I'll go to a suspended, and so that's the type of chord being arpeggiated. Then I'm going to randomize that and make it span a lot of notes, and turn the tempo to something like 100 to start with. Push play on something. Okay. And then it latched. So we've got something going there. But then what I'm going to do is go from pattern to the drum modulation. And you can hear that on this case it's kind of different from the pocket operator, where the drum, the sync signal is there all the time, so the drum is going to be playing. Alright, and I can turn the pitch up a little bit, you'll hear it better. And then you'll see immediately that it's synced up with this arpeggio. Well, alright, and then we're going to add to that, I'm going to put the same pattern signal into the pitchMod. Alright, and I'm still on the filter, so I can turn that down. You can hear it. And that is the default pattern going there, so let's mix it up a little bit. Alright, we'll stick with that. I'll adjust the tuning in a second. Alright, and then now I'm going to latch in an arpeggio that seems kind of close in pitch. That seems pretty close, and then now main thing is just add some reverb. And so I want it to be clear what instrument is doing what, so I'm going to turn the decay up a little. So there are some hits from the Kastle Drum that are melodic and some that are noisy. And now that the tuning is kind of set up, I'm going to play around with the feed a little bit more. Getting some nice two-note chords in that now. And then now we can control the tempo over here, and it will stay synced up over on the Kastle. Alright, now I just decided to skip the attenuator to try to get the volumes a little bit more balanced. You can hear that clipping on the input, and I don't know, it gives it kind of a nice distortion. Alright, so here we are with the SQ1, and the setup that I've got is I'm coming out of the main for the sound on the Kastle Drum, and I'm taking that through the Korg NTS1 for some reverb and a little bit. And the main thing to think about though is that I've got the Y cable into the I/O, and right now I have one of them going into CVA and the other one going into sync out. And that's a little bit different from what you would normally do if you were sequencing a more normal synthesizer. You might use the gate and the CV together, but the gate is a 10-volt signal, and so we don't want to put that into the Kastle Drum. We'll be fine using the sync signal to trigger the drums and then get the pitch data from the CVA. And first thing I want to show though is that when you push the function button, that there's a voltage selection here. You don't want to go to the highest one at 8 volts. You can go to 5, 2, or 1. I go to 5. It gives the biggest range. And I'm also in the chromatic mode for this. Now, you need to go a little step further and go to one of the settings where there are parallel tracks, the A track and the B track, and make sure that your B voltage setting is also low enough. So both of these are 5, both of them are chromatic. Alright, so right now the red one's in there, so the right one is going to be the sync signal. I'm going to put that into the trig end. Okay, and I can control that speed with this speed knob. Alright, so that part is good, but we figure something out. When we put the left one into the pitch and push the button, if you follow along, only the odd numbered steps actually trigger the drum. So we're not getting the full 16-step sequence. Okay, and to fix that, let me stop this. I'm going to pull that out. And so to fix that issue, we have to go into the global settings. So I'm going to turn this off, and you hold down play and turn it back on and let off. Now, turns out that the sequencer mode knob is what actually sets this type of stuff. And the manual does not say anything about this. It talks about the first 3. Those all have that every other step issue with the drum. But if you go up to the 4th one, 5th one, or the 6th one, it works on every step. So let's just do that. I'm going to push power to lock that in. So I've changed the step setting. Then I'm going to go back to this sequencer mode, so it'll run along for 16 steps. Now I'm going to plug this back into trig in, so the sync is going to be given the beat. You can already tell it's faster. Okay, and so now this is something to think about, that I have so much more control here than, for example, with the pattern sequencer on the drum itself. Alright, now in order to give this kind of the right feel, I think it needs some reverb. So let me add that. A little bit spacey. And now there are a lot of features on the SQ1, but one to think about in particular for this type of style is going to be the slide setting. We can just add some slides in. Okay, so that sounds pretty cool, especially with the reverb, but the thing to think about is that now with the drum we have sort of a free LFO to use. So in order to make this a little less confusing, I'm going to turn the slides off. And so the clock now is just given sort of a texture onto the pitch, and I can turn the decay out, slow it down a little. So it's a pretty specific vibe, but there's a lot of potential because you can pretty much dial in any melody that you want that way. Now, that's not the only thing that's possible. The other thing that's possible is that we can basically just duplicate the CV signal that we're using in the pitch. I'm going to remove that texture from the clock also for right now. And so I'm just going to duplicate the pitch signal into the drumMod. So now what that's going to do, speed it up a little. So now we've got a thing going here where the CVA is not only giving us a pitch, but it's also controlling what the drum hit is going to be. So the type of synthesis is being determined by the sequence. And I think you can get a lot of good stuff with it that way, but it's a case where the more control might be better. And so to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out the sync and just not even use the sync. Instead, I'm going to use CVB here. Okay, so just to go back over what this is, I've got CVA going into the pitch modulation. So the A is going to be our pitch, and B is going to be the drum modulation signal. Now, right now when you're in one of these 16-step sequences, A and B are identical. But if we go up, for example, to this, let's speed it up a tad. Alright, now A is going to be the pitch, and then B is going to be the drum modulation. And the thing to think about is that drumMod works by changes in voltage, so it doesn't do to just set all one thing. If you want that, then use Strigan, but I'm going to do just a pattern of down, up, to start with. Lower the pitch a little, speed it up some. And we can actually glitch this up a little bit with slide. And I hear slide a little bit more in the drum sequence than in the pitch, but just going to leave it like that. Then another thing that you can do, and this gives a whole lot of variety, is if we come back to active step, now I'm going to just take out 2 steps of the drumMod sequence, and suddenly these are going to start to phase and give us a much longer sequence. And so this is pretty minimalist, but it's, you know, it's basically almost turning into a song. One thing I should point out is that I choose this pitchMod value pretty carefully because it kind of makes a timbrement, so it sets a scale that I think works pretty good with the SQ1 and other stuff. So your ear might want this different. It becomes more subtle in terms of pitch over here, and then bigger swings in pitch over there. And I'm going to go ahead and add in the noise. Kind of hear that low. So I think especially with the reverb, it's got some cool sounds. I'll even boost the reverb a little and go to the space mode. Alright, so I got both castles here. I want to show a couple of detailed minor things first, then we'll talk about Easter egg mode, do some noise, and then make something a little bit more musical. To start with, I've got audio coming out of the Kastle Drum. I've got the 2 synths grounded just by an aux cable in their I/O ports. And what I'm going to do is take the audio out of the Kastle 1.5, put that into the drums port over here, and so that's going to be a way to tap the audio from the synth, just like that. And so we're not going to need a mixer yet again. Now, I think in one of the last videos I said that clock in was the same as LFO reset, and you know, they're in the same spot and they have kind of the same function, but I just want to point out that they are different. If I take a square LFO signal on the 1.5, put that into LFO reset, then take a signal out of the triangle LFO, we'll go to say pitch, and turn up the pitch modulation. So that's something that starts very quickly, high-pitched, and then falls. So it's, I guess, sort of a sawtooth shape. Very specific sound. All right, but then how about over here on the drum? Well, it's the opposite. If I go from clock to the clock in, and then punch into the LFO here, you'll hear it rise and then stop. So it's a ramp. So you can get some really different sounds, but using the two things together. Okay, so now let's talk about Easter egg mode. And it's real straightforward how to get into that mode on the drum. I have a little jumper cable that I basically turned into a key here. You want to connect the plus terminal to the trig in, and there we go. And then you turn 3 of the knobs to their maximum. So the decay, the drum knob, and the pitch knob. And you turn it on. You can pull the little key out of your jumper cable, and then we'll set everything at sort of a more reasonable level. So now we're in Easter egg mode on the drum, and the question is, well, what does it do? What it does is, instead of sending noises as part of like the synthesis modes out of the noises port, it actually sends the envelope of a drum hit. So I think it's easier just to show that. I'm gonna again, let's hook up the sound, and then we're gonna take that envelope and just send it to the pitch in over at the 1.5. And then, so now as soon as we make a drum hit, I'll do that with the clock to the trig. We'll start to hear it over on the 1.5. Add more decay. And so that's all that it is, but turns out to be handy for sound things, but I also figured out a way that it could help synchronize the pocket operator. So let's do a little bit of a backtrack and take a look at that. Okay, brief aside, I'm back with the PO14 and just the aux cable and the drum. And remember that the earlier in the video I showed you how that the sync signal from the pocket operator is kind of weak. All it can do is trigger a single drum hit from drum modulation. So we get that. All right, now that we know Easter egg mode, it's sort of strange, but I'm going to use the envelope. So that's the drum envelope out of the noises port, which Easter egg mode gives us. Put that to the clock in port. And so in some strange way, I'm using the Kastle Drum to sync itself. And what that's going to do is it's going to make the timing of the pattern sequencer go with the pocket operator timing. And so that's going to be good. Or at least better, I'm going to put the pattern into pitchMod. All right, push play. I think it might be a little better to go sort of like almost like a bongo type of sound. And speed it up. And then if you're curious, I actually put the envelope signal onto the scope, and so you can take a look at that. Okay, but one thing for sure that the Easter egg mode does is that envelope, you're able to send it at high speeds and stuff, so it almost becomes like a different wave shape for this thing, so you can do a bunch of noise with it. But then I think it's also important to add that I feel like it actually changes the sort of the characteristics of the Kastle Drum. I'm not going to show it, but it seems to me like an Easter egg mode that the decays, even when you have it maxed out, are not quite as long. But you do gain a lot by having that envelope. Alright, so this is the Easter egg envelope into the timbre modulation on the 1.5. And so I feel like having access to that envelope, it opens up some things on the Kastles, particularly if you have both of them, that basically can enable you to access a lot of sort of classic synthesizer sounds. Alright, so this is something that's a little bit different using the same methods. I just changed the synthesis mode to formant over on the 1.5, and I'm tapping off of that. Some slow changes over here, and some faster beats, and the envelope coming over there to the Waveshape. And this is sort of another one of the types of benefits that I was describing earlier about having them not synced. I slowed it down a little so it could do that one part a little bit longer. All right. Okay, so let's make something a little bit more musical with the two Kastles. Easter egg mode is off on the drum. Then I'm going to take the oscillator out signal from the 1.5, put that into the drums port. It'll mix it in, and so we can hear the 1.5 now. Okay, then next thing, I want to actually sync these two Kastles up, so I'm going to use the LFO, the square LFO out of the 1.5, send that over to the clock in, and so that means this rate is going to be sort of what drives the main tempo. I'm going to turn it up a little bit, like maybe there, and then I'm going to leave the tempo on the Kastle Drum a little bit slower so that we'll have a different speed that we can use out of the clock in a minute. Now, for whatever reason, I sort of like crossing the little sequencers up, so I'm going to take pattern from the Kastle Drum, and I'm going to put that into the pitchMod over here on the 1.5, and we'll turn this up. Okay, So we're getting a little bit there. Then I'm going to take the stepped over here on the 1.5, and I'm going to put that into the dMod, the drumMod on the Kastle Drum, and turn that all the way up. Alright, then I need to make a few adjustments here, like I'm going to turn the decay over to this side, and then just so we don't have to hear those same patterns, I'm going to change this one up with the feed, and then I'm going to change this one up with the bit in. I'm going to speed it up a little bit. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the clock signal from the Kastle Drum, and I'm going to put that over into the timbre modulation on the 1.5, and then turn that up a little bit. And so now, because of that slow clock over here changing the timbre on the 1.5, we got kind of like two types of passages that are happening. Okay, and then another thing that I want to do to give it a little bit of swing is to go from the square LFO on the 1.5, send that into the rate modulation, and turn up the rMod a little bit. I got to back off a little on the tempo. Then I think I need to change the pattern a little bit. Last thing, I want to add some pitchMod to the pattern on the drum. So it's a two-part thing now, with the timbre real low for part of the clock cycle and then a little bit higher on the other part. Sounds pretty good in headphones. Okay, so this last setup with the VOLCA modular is a little bit more complicated, so I'm going to just go through it. I've got the Kastle Drum and the modular grounded by the I/O on the drum and the CV in port on the VOLCA modular, but I'm not going to be sending any signals on that wire. Next, I've got the audio out from both of them going into the Kastle Duet mixer, and then that's coming around, and again I'm just going to be using the Korg NTS1 for reverb, and that's coming out to the recorder. Now maybe you don't have another mixer or another reverb, you can still do stuff, and this just brings up some things about the drum and the VOLCA modular together in terms of voltage safety and that sort of thing. Some people have sort of questioned whether it's okay to do. I made measurements of my own, and so of course I'm just doing this with my own gear, but I will say that I've measured voltages on the modular, and especially if you send things through the utility on here with that turned all the way up, the voltages get up to something like 4.7 volts, which is very close to the voltage that you can get from the Kastle. And so the voltages on the modular are fairly low. I don't think it's any harm that can be done to the Kastle. And then I think that the 5 volts coming from the Kastle is close enough to the 4.7 that the modular can send itself, to where I think that the whole thing is okay. And the drum will rectify any of the negative voltage signals sent from the VOLCA modular. And so then once you're grounded, I just want to show one thing here, so you can keep in mind that pretty much anything back and forth is fair game. So I've got the drum's sound coming out. I've got a pattern running over here. I'm going to turn that up. But note I'm turning it up on the VOLCA modular. It's just coming right in to the space out effect, and I can turn that up. Might not be anybody's favorite reverb, but it can give kind of a nice different sound to the drum if that's all you've got. Alright, so I want to start in on this from the VOLCA modular side, and to do that we're going to clear out the patterns and stuff, and then I'm going to clear out the motion sequencing, but leave that on for later. I'm going to drop things down an octave, and so we're sounding like this. Well, where's our sound? Oh, volume's down. Okay. And then I'm going to pick a scale of minor pentatonic. Okay. Sounds like bMod. Alright. Now, first thing I'm going to do is sort of try to thicken up the sound a little bit. To do that, I'm going to run from the second oscillator, so that's this second from the right over there, into the low pass gate, and so then we get just more of a hollow fundamental sound. Then to give it a little bit of beef, I'm going to take the signal out of the main oscillator, put that into the split. I'm going to use the split sort of backwards like a mixer, and then I'm going to take the envelope coming out of LPG 1, or sorry, out of function 1, put that into the other side of the split, and then run this merged signal down into the middle of LPG 1. Alright, so that sounds like this. I'm going to leave them down for now. Alright, now we're going to put in a sequence. and I'm going to try and get something that's okay. We're kind of going to be stuck with it for this. But when I'm doing multiple memory locations and that sort of thing, remember that you could change up this bass pattern. All right, so let's do a stepper chord. All right, we'll just try that. All right, I think it's gonna do. So tighten that up a little bit. I don't have any reverb on, but if I did, it would sound like this. And then when I add the fold, that comes in through the gate, so it sounds like this. Okay, so now let's bring the drum in, and to do that, what I'm going to do is take the gate out signal from the VOLCA modular and send that over to the drum modulation. Alright, so then when I play that sequence, gives us a drum, and there's no issue about syncing or that sort of thing. Alright, and then this is just sort of the simplest case here. I'm going to take the pitch out from the VOLCA modular and put that into the pitch over on the drum. Alright, got to turn the pitchMod up a little bit. This is a case of trying to figure out what you're really going for, whether you want more of like a conga type sound with not much pitch variation or more full note. And I'm going to turn the modular sound down so you can hear the drum. Okay, we've got that. Then one way to mix this up just very easily is to go, instead of from the gate to trigger the drumMod, go from the squared off woggle. I'm going to turn the drumMod all the way up. And so that's going to give us different drum hits randomly. But then the pitch is still going with the main sequence. And you can do a little bit of volume mixing just with the decay. So if I want the drum a little bit more present, I can just turn the decay up. Okay, and at this point I want to start talking about the fold. Now when I change that on here, it gives some nice adjustments to the sound. We're going to hear that, but I want to share something that I really haven't heard anywhere else, which is that when you make changes to the fold, it also makes changes to the voltage that's coming out of that socket. So normally this is an input, but we're going to tap off of it as an output. And I'm going to send that over to the pitchMod, and you can hear it. The drum sound itself is changing. I'm going to turn that pitch mod all the way up to make it more sensitive. Okay. Now, so then what we're going to do is we're going to do a motion sequencing capture of the fold. So that's going to enable me to sort of record that slidey drum hit sound in real time. So I'm going to get it playing. I'll start with it low, press record here, and we're going to motion capture 16 steps of that. Alright, so we've got that, but then what I'm going to do is I'm going to write that to memory slot 1, write it to memory slot 2, and write it to memory slot 3. Then I'm going to call up 2, and I'm going to clear the motion sequencing. We're going to hit play, and hit record, and I'm going to capture a different pattern. Alright, we're going to write that into 2, and then we're going to go over to 3, clear that motion sequencing, and press play, hit record. I'm going to try and stay low on this one. Alright, so then we're going to write that third one. And then from here, we can do memory 1, 2, 3. So we're going to play all of them. And I think it's time to turn on the reverb. I'll go with the hall. And I didn't take the time to do different sequences for each of those memory slots, but you could. So you're able to chain out not only the bass line on the modular, but also pitch changes on the drum through motion sequencing. And I'm going to make the drum sounds change using the woggle. And I'll just let that play for a little bit. Now I added one more little thing going back the other way from the clock, because our LFO is completely free, back into the ratio. Gives it some nice highs over there on the modular. And it can get glitchy. So that's some different ways to hook the Kastle drum to different gear. Hope there's something that you find useful. To close this video out, I am going to hook it to the Arturia Microfreak. And I'm a big fan of the Microfreak, but I've always said that it could use some sort of minimal beats, also some reverb to kind of go with it as support. There's some things like pitch CV out and gate out, and then even a modulation out from the keyboard pressure, and didn't really find anything that I liked, so I ended up just using the clock signal and keeping it pretty simple. Check that out. I appreciate everybody watching, and I'll see you in the next video.